the lives. How do you stand on cilantro? Are you team yes or team no? Because I know that question divides us here at Zeplin. So I'm curious to know what your take is.
I am willing to be the captain of Team Cilantro. I love it, eat it all the time. And it's a staple garnish in Indian cuisine. So I've also grown up with it. So there's nostalgia also hitting me every time I consume it. So yeah, love it.
There you go. I'm happy that we have another Team Cilantro rep. I always feel like when people always say, they're like, it tastes like soap, I'm like, I just don't understand how that could be possible. And I feel bad for them because like it makes everything so much better. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We are officially live in all of the areas that we need to be. So I wanted to welcome everybody in. This is Zeplin's community interview series called Design to Dev, where we sit down with people who design and build beautiful products. And I am very, very lucky to have with us today one of our very own product designers, Kundu. Kundu, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and what you're working on. We'd love to get to know you.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Kundu. I'm a product designer here at Zeplin. But like all designers here at Zeplin, I tend to work on all sorts of things here and there, involving research and whatnot. I think recently I've been involved in the design system. So a lot of our components, we've revamped the way Zeplin looks and feels. I'm still working on some improvements there. Outside of that, a little bit of pricing recently. But yeah, day to day, I think maybe week to week is a better thing to summarize for me. Heavy involvement with the design team, a lot of critiques, a lot of ideation, regular meetings with the development team and PMs, some brainstorming there. And more recently, again, a lot of focus time, which I've been really grateful for. Yeah, rare to come by.
Awesome. Very cool. I'm excited to hear the dedicated time to just to speak with developers, because I think that's actually a newer concept that I don't know that I've heard from a lot of the folks that I've chatted with. So it's awesome to know that you do have those regular conversations. And I'd be curious, like just selfishly, I'm like, I want to be a fly on the wall in those meetings just to like hear what happens truly between designers and developers. So that would be great.
And hey, Nico, it doesn't have to be just designers and developers. If it's a cross-functional team, I like to be a fly on the wall sometimes. Like, let me just take down notes of all those decisions you're making, what inputs you've been taking, because I think that's helpful to be a good designer. Just be aware of all the decisions that have gone in.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Very cool.
Completely agree.
I'm happy to hear that we have somebody like you who is both Team Cilantro and makes a point to make sure that you're working with cross collaboration across all the different teams or crews in Zeplin, I should say. So I'm very happy to hear that. I'm curious to know too, to get to know you a little bit better. What are the core beliefs or experiences that have shaped you the most as a designer?
Core beliefs. I think core beliefs vary a lot every season, but an experience that I would say that has shaped a lot of my insight is having a relentless focus. So I like to say, you really need to be drunk on something. You're chasing an idea with such deep focus that it results in really good output. It could be a business metric. It could be the way a product feels. It could be like typically designers do, the user experience. But it could also be efficiency and data savings for engineers. I just think you really have to care deeply enough and have a focus on craft, because I think that shines through the most.
I love that. I love to hear that. And especially with, and we'll get into this a little bit later too, but especially with all of the AI talk, I think that's been a big focus on like, okay, moving forward, if this does get democratized in the sense that anybody can hit the button to create designs, like those more artisanal, like handcrafted UIs and other things are going to be a lot more valuable. And you do have to have that passion for it. So I'm happy to hear that. I like that a lot. Thank you for sharing. My last question for you here too, just to get to know you a little bit better, is if you could point to any person or anything, who or what would be your inspiration when it comes to design?
Way too many. I will say that I always look into the past for inspiration. So, going back, if you think of design, like the Vignelli and the Rams, like 60s, 70s, all the stuff that happened there, but also just in general history, right? Pop culture and art and the entire computing era that happened in the last century. I think there's a lot to learn from how people intentionally design an experience, whether it's digital software design or not, because digital software design is like what, 30, 40, 50 years old? I think there's a lot more right before then to learn from. So I tend to just lean on that a lot.
I love that. I love it. Do you have a favorite artist in mind? Like, do you have like, if you're like, oh, I love this one person's work, do you have anyone that you can point to?
Um, Again, flavor of the season would probably be Vignelli's grit. I was working on design systems recently, right, as I mentioned. So I had been studying a lot of Vignelli's work. And then I came across like, how do you standardize in the New York subway, for example? Just one of many things. And how do you use a grid system for all sorts of uses of copy? Yeah, I would say that has been a particular muse of mine recently.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I think we can segue pretty nicely into our next section, which I like to call overrated or underrated. So I'm curious to know what your take is on a variety of different things, ranging from fonts to design practices and all of those things too. So I'll throw a term at you. You can let me know if you think they are overrated or underrated. I'm gonna eliminate the option to say properly rated because I want to know. I want to know. You gotta take a stand.
All right. I do think properly rated is a valid answer, but I'll follow the rules.
All right, perfect. We'll start off easy. We'll start off with some fonts. The first font is Inter. Do you think Inter is overrated or underrated?
Probably underrated is what I would choose. I think it's very accessible. It's a very modern sans serif, free. You can use it in many different aspects. So I would say definitely underrated. Hasn't hit the overrated hype yet.
Not yet. It might be headed there soon. That's what a few people have said. But I'm happy to hear that there are still Team Inter out there. So thank you. Next one is Helvetica. Overrated or underrated?
I have to say anything other than properly rated here is a crime. But in the spirit of the game, I will say underrated. Helvetica has carried a lot of what modern typography, I think, looks like if you just walk out on the streets. I think you can attribute it a lot to Helvetica and similar fonts. So maybe not underrated anymore. It's gone through that hype and now it's kind of just there. But I would probably say underrated still.
All right. All right. Good to know. Good to know. And the last one is Papyrus. Overrated or underrated?
It's such a polarizing font. Honestly, if I'm really thinking about it, I would still say underrated. Yes, it's a meme stock at this point. It's not a farm font anymore. I understand, but the fact it's able to make you think of mystical and very rural vibes immediately, hey, that's pretty good. I think it just got overused. So underrated and overused is what I'd say.
Ooh, that's a good one. Underrated and overused. I like the little caveat there. That's a good one. I'm curious to know too what you think about skeuomorphism. Do you think is overrated or underrated?
I would probably put it firmly in the overrated bucket, especially because of the way it started. Representing everything in 3D, everything how it appears in the real world. Although I think that's only helpful when it's direct manipulation stuff. Pinch to zoom, things like that. Like when you use interaction in the real world to make it look more authentic in 2D, that's great. But just adding shadows to things for the sake of it, not a huge fan.
Good to know. Good to know. The next one is flat design. It's contemporary counterpart. Overrated or underrated?
I also think flat design has been overused a lot to the point where the essence of minimalism is now just 3 rectangles and 2 colors. It's just flat for the sake of it. I would also lean maybe a little overrated. I feel like things shouldn't be also very flat. There is some value to mimicking the real world and some depth. Yeah, slightly overrated maybe.
Okay. Maybe the next era is going to be like a combo of the two. There's going to be a happy middle ground where we can all appreciate both of them.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. I love that. And moving on into just some more questions that I have for you, because I'm curious to know just more about like your process, how you approach different like tasks and all of these other fun things as well too. Here at Zeplin specifically, I'm very curious to know how is your relationship with your developers, and are there any areas for improvement there?
At Zeplin, I've had the honor and privilege to work with several developers over my time here now, and on average, I think all of them communicate really well. They, as I was mentioning, care about the product really well. So I have to spend very little time justifying why it's worth considering an idea. So yeah, overall, I've had a lot of great time with all of our developers, collaborating, ideating, and then even shipping products. Um, Room for improvement. I'm a sucker for synchronous time, so I would always wish, like,
Oh,
I wish you were here in the room with me, just hacking stuff together.
yeah.
Uh, but that's precisely where a tool like Zeplin kind of helps us, just brain dump thoughts there, and we can collaborate there instead.
Awesome. I love to hear it. And I love to especially know on the ground level that there is that appreciation for design and like understand, like the developers have a good understanding of design and design practices that they're able to respect everything of what you do. Cause I feel like so often you see online people are like, my devs don't care. Like they don't like they're not doing X, Y, Z. And you often see a lot of tension. So I'm really happy to hear that like internally everything is great. So thank
Yeah,
you for
that's a
sharing.
that's a good point. Because if you think about it, we design and develop for designers and developers.
Mhm.
So not only are we simmering in the experiences of design and developers, we kind of have to take that for our role as well in designing the software. So yeah, I would say increased empathy is really nice.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I that just makes me very happy to hear. So thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
What a nice note. What a nice thing to find out. With that being said, what do you think the future of design to dev looks like in your opinion?
Ooh, it's changing so rapidly, and everybody has their own opinions. So, just my 2 cents for this would be that with the rise of design systems, I think uh, more increasingly, more than ever, designers and developers are talking with the same vocabulary. We're talking about the same assets, same properties, we're on the same table at the same time, much earlier in the process.
Mhm.
So, my read would be eventually, whether we're iterating or whether you're hyper focused on efficiency, we would be working on the same things. So the same components, the same language. I see that being really unified. Now, whether that means developers are designing directly with code or designers are dragging and dropping code, I don't know. Everyone has their own approach to that. But I do think that this collaboration will result in a shared vocabulary and a shared working space to debate and talk through things.
I love that. The future is a Rosetta Stone for designers and developers to be able to come together and speak the same
Precisely,
language.
yeah.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. With that being said, I'm curious to know too what you think specifically about AI, because I think that is what people are starting to point to as like this is the future of all design, of all development. So I appreciate the fact that you sort of mentioned something different, but I'm curious to know what you think about AI specifically in those workflows.
Um, it's pretty wild to predict things at the moment, but
Mhm.
what I would hope for is that AI can really assist with repetitive tasks,
Mhm.
manual labor. I know generative AI could be used well for generation of ideas, but I do think that designers and everyone who is working in products should still retain their sense of curation, right? AI might have to do with creation, but it'll still take a refined eye or a set of refined eyes to pick out what will work and what's best for us out of them. So, yeah, I hope that AI, does my laundry for me in a way.
I love to hear that because it's funny that you mentioned that. I just saw a post the other day that was like, I want AI to be doing those things. Like I want AI to be able to walk my dog, to do these things that I don't want to do your laundry, not to make art, like not to replace artists. So I appreciate the optimism. And I think that more than ever has been an increasing response from all the folks that I've spoken with of like, I hope that it's just going to be another tool akin to like the calculator and how that helped advance the field of mathematics and how it made it easier for people to get into it, but also still allowed people to expand beyond what was possible before. So I'm hopeful as well too that this will create a very integrated future for us all to be able to keep our jobs and to just have fun and do a lot better. So awesome. Thank you
Yeah,
very
I
much.
think what the job is, it might change still.
Mhm.
We might be focused on different areas, like a different percentage of our weekly time would be spent on different tasks. But my hope would still be that it's really the humans, and we have the ability to reason and really decide design decisions and all other decisions. So yeah, would hope AI to replace the grunt
Awesome.
work.
Awesome. I love that. Going back to the previous one, you sort of touched on this a little bit
Mhm.
before too, but how is communication with developers different than communication with other designers? So I know, your hope for the future is that we have this shared language that, it wouldn't be that different in the future, but currently, what are the main differences that you see?
Hmm. Um, I can only speak from my experience. So I would say here at Zeppelin, a lot of the conversations with developers, especially later on in the process, revolve around like implementation and efficiency. Whereas with designers, it's a lot about ideation and very, divergent thinking.
Mhm.
So one difference I've noticed is in general, designers, I think, are more equipped to be vulnerable, share ideas that are hacky, that might be shot down. That also encourages people to give very direct critical feedback. So, as I said, on average, I think Zeppelin developers are also very well equipped for sharing feedback early, being direct. But in general, if I were to zoom out, I do think designers are a lot more, not empathetic, but just they're okay with being vulnerable and sharing shitty ideas and taking very critical feedback, which I think results in a better product at the end.
Awesome. I love to hear that. That's awesome to know that we at least have that culture of collaboration and understanding between the disciplines too. So that's awesome to hear. Thank you for sharing. And my one of my final questions for you here. We're nearing the end of our interview portion. Is what does the role of the product designer look like versus what people outside of the profession think that it looks like? And I know that you touched on this maybe a little bit too about like maybe in the future priorities will be shifting. Maybe it'll be a little bit different than we thought. But what does that look like in your opinion from the outside versus what it actually is?
Hmm. I'd say compared to your UI or UX design 101 class, product design in practice touches a lot more areas than you might think. So as you start to take maybe more ownership in your projects, you will be required to maybe do some research yourself, maybe really understand how those business metrics and product metrics are working. It's not always just about sitting in a design tool and just me, my design tool, my perfect designs. I think uh, in practice, you should be compelled to really reach out to your team and collaborate. So it's more of a jack of all trades realization for me. Not saying that product designers are all generalists, but you just need to be okay with your daily tasks varying a lot.
I love that. That's one of the a very we had a similar answer to that before where they were like, I thought initially when I came into this field, I was just going to be able to sit down, design for 8 hours a day, and then go home. But it's so much like there's so many meetings that I have to learn. I have to understand the business context of all this too. So I think and I understand that that's very helpful, and I hope that that's helpful for anybody listening if you're relatively newer in the field to understand that this is part of the job that you should be paying attention to all these different things as well too. Um,
Yeah, I also think that experience is really valuable to catch if you are early in the field. Just go out there, freelance. If somebody needs a small design issue, just see what it's like. You would actually learn, even I think way back in a student setting, that design actually involves a lot more than just the creation side of it.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. And my last question to you is a very controversial question, but I'm curious to know your take on it because it does relate to something that we've spoken many times before already here today. Do you think that designers need to learn how to code?
So I do have a background in CS, and I like to think of myself as a half-baked engineer. So just clear disclaimer on my bias. I do think designers should be very deeply aware of any system that they're designing for. So for product designers, that means web standards, but I would also say you should be familiar with how front-end code works. You should at least know how CSS properties are applied. Um, yes, you don't need to know complex algorithms or a lot of that stuff. That can be abstracted away. But I think as digital software designers, we should be very well informed on how a software is built. You could say the same for anything else. Like an architect might not need to know material science and mixing, but they're probably factoring that into their job somewhere, right?
Awesome. I love that. Do you think that that will help us eventually reach that shared language between the two? Do you think that more developers should start to maybe think about design thinking and principles and vice versa? Like, should designers start to understand, like, what would sort of be the first steps in your mind to creating that, like, Rosetta Stone for product development?
I would say maybe, and this is my take, that the first step is probably being a sponge, just being truly curious and truly aware, or trying to be aware of what is around you and what's important. So yes, like I would not say like, hey, designers, go start lead coding from tomorrow, it'll help you. No, not at all. But at least maybe do an effort the next time you see a dev working and a little bored and a little free. Ask them what systems they're using, what languages they're using, what helps them in your designs that makes their job better. And more often than not, it'll be something along the lines of a shared language.
Awesome. I love that. So the biggest lesson I think that everybody, and myself included, can take is that be very curious about the other side, and whatever you can do, like try to just open and establish that dialogue first with the other people that you're working together with, and that'll hopefully help everybody be a lot more cohesive, I guess you could say, in the future.
Mhm.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Kundu. That was fantastic. I've got a few rapid fire questions here for you now too, to sort of
Ooh.
close us out here. So bear with me on this one. You can take a few seconds as well too if you need, because I know that some of these are a little difficult. However, my first one here for you is, if you had to guess, how many rectangles have designers created?
Like what?
Like
Overall?
ever. Yeah, in the history of all design.
All designers? I don't know, millions, billions. I cannot think of a reasonable way to quantify this. Maybe, the number of words and authors, all the authors across history have used, because that's like the unit. I don't know. I would probably throw it off to something like that, something a bit more measurable, like words in books.
Okay. If you had to go Price is Right style, because I do ask everybody, try to pick one number. If you had to guess on just one single number of how many rectangles, what would you say?
I mean, if I'm gambling on lotteries, probably a couple billions, like 4 billion, 5 billion. I don't
All
know.
right, 5 billion. Okay, good to know. Good to know. That we've had answers that range all the way from like a few million all the way up to like infinity, which I don't know if that technically counts, but we've had quite the range of that too. So I appreciate that. And once I have an answer, I'll be sure to reach out to all of our guests, past and present and future, to let them know who got the closest and send them a prize.
I would be very interested to break apart how you got that answer.
That'll be like the did you watch Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or read that book?
I'm aware of some quotes that come my way. No.
Basically it was like, what the big question, the answer to life, the universe, and everything was 42, and they were like, well, you should have asked what the question was. And so that's, I feel like, what that on the same level, if I could ask some AI supercomputer, that's the one question I'd ask, is how many rectangles were created. If you could describe your design to dev process in just 3 words, what would those 3 words be for you?
Ooh, iterative, collaborative, and exhaustive.
Ooh, okay. I like the last one. What's the reason for the inclusion of exhaustive there on the last one?
I think I tend to, especially more with my immediate peers, which are usually developers or product managers. I think I tend to really exhaust a lot of the design ideas, even if we know, like, hey, this probably is the simplest and the best way. I tend to just go and iterate a lot. So yeah, I would say my collaboration process, especially with devs, tends to be a little more exhaustive. Like, let's really make sure we've considered everything.
I love that. I love that. Very thorough. But that's a fantastic word to use. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation there. I have 2 more for you. If you could describe your design process using just 1 word, what would that word be?
I mean, just following the thread of everything we've said today, probably curious. I think my process at the bottom has always been very curious
I love that.
about the problem or the solution.
Awesome. I love that. And my final question for you here today is, if you could describe yourself using just 1 word, what would that word be?
I'd like to say curious again.
Curious. Perfect.
But yeah,
There you
I think
go.
that.
I love it. It's funny. The first time I asked that question was for the marketing crew, and I expected everybody to be like, "Oh, I think my word is this." But the most frequent reaction I got to that question was like, "This is the most like life existential crisis question I've ever had before. Like, I need like a whole year to figure out what I would boil myself down to." So I appreciate the quickness that you were able to answer that with. Well, thank you so much, Kundu. That was all of the questions I had for you here today, which brings us into our very last segment of the show, which is actually my favorite segment, where I like to so lovingly call it "So You Think You're a Designer," and it's where we put your design skills to the test by recreating the Zeppelin logo in just 2 minutes using a web-based version of Microsoft Paint. So
Oh,
whenever you are ready, you are welcome to share your screen. And for those of you who want to follow along, the website is called jspaint.app. If you want to test out your skills and send in your drawing too, I would love to see them. In the meantime, while you're pulling that up, we do have two comments. One from Palin. She also really wants AI to do her laundry. So I think we've got a future, and if we can make an AI robot that's able to handle tasks such as that. And then Berju was also watching and enjoyed the part where you were flustered when figured out that I was asking about all designers in the history of design, how many rectangles. So thank you very much for your answer so far, and I'm very excited to see what you're able to do.
so
Oh.
I think I just pulled up. This is like Paint, right, online.
Yep. Microsoft Paint Online. Yeah, if you can zoom in, that would be fantastic. You've got a big, beautiful canvas now in front of you, and you have 2 minutes. So as soon as the first pixel hits the canvas, you will go ahead and start. And then Palin actually mentioned that you're lying for your word. The word to describe you would not be curious; it would in fact be competitive. And that's what she thinks that your word should be.
Uh, in sports, yes, extremely competitive.
That's we saw a little bit of that at the spin event, not this year at Config, last year, when you were actually our ping pong tournament champion. So I understand and I respect that. So thank you very much. But we are ready for you now. The stage is yours. You have precisely 2 minutes, so feel free to use the entirety of that time to add little details, whatever you'd like.
All right, I guess I'll just start freestyling the shape. Oh, that's terrible. I need help. Um, MS Paint should still have rotate, right?
Ooh, oh, I've never seen anybody use the oval as well to create the lines within the ship. That's great.
Just ballpark something. Yeah, I am terrible at drawing, and I have a trackpad in front of me right now. So excuse my skill set, please. Uh, I guess we should still draw because it is. Nope, nope.
Wow, that was good. That was really good. This is fantastic. I have tried so many times before too, and none of mine look even remotely as close to being good as any of these have turned out to be.
I guess that's a very simple version of the logo. I think I might still have some time, so I'm
You
gonna
do,
throw in
yeah.
a smiley face here.
You still have got a little over a minute too. So if you want to experiment with any colors, if you want to do anything, if you want to add any clouds, the world is your oyster. You still got 1 minute remaining.
I think colors is a can of worms that I'm not opening today. Maybe that's good enough for me. I'll take that for MS Paint online.
All right. Okay. That is fantastic. I appreciate the accuracy specifically of the innovation that you chose to do by using the little ellipses to draw the interior lines. I think is something that I have never seen before. So I hats off to you and the creativity for jumping back into Paint. If you can file save this and send it to me, I want to make a big collage of all of them at the very end. That would be much appreciated. But you're welcome to stop sharing your screen and come back in here, and we can say our final goodbyes to everybody watching. And Burju actually wanted you to make it ugly because this actually looked too good. So Burju was hoping for a little something else using the trackpad, and Jen loved the tiny tail. So the little tail fin was a fantastic addition. So thank you very much. With that being said, we are at the end of our show. So I wanted to thank you so much for coming on and for sharing more about who you are, your design processes, all of those fun and interesting things, so we could get to know you a little bit better. If you have any final words of wisdom, anything that you'd like to leave us off with, that would be fantastic.
No words of wisdom from me, but thanks for having me here, Nico. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kundu. I hope you had a wonderful time. I'm very excited to see what everybody else in at Zeppelin will think about when they see your new logo. Who knows? Maybe it'll be our official one for our Zeppelin Summer Breeze. We didn't do a new logo, so maybe this can be it. We'll ask Palin to see what she thinks. But thank you so much, Kundu. It was fantastic to chat with you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And we will talk to you all later. All right. Goodbye. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next week.